Now, if we do not autonomously clean our psyches and strive to live morally, and if we continue to violate the natural order because of our inner emotional state, we will allow the ego to manifest surrogate channels to exercise its repressions and other negative debris. In short, if we give up the right rulership of the self, we inevitably breed Orwellian political and religious tyrants to take over the job and turn us into what George Simmel called the smiling depressives, or worse. Right? Or Carl Jung said it much more simply. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside of you as fate. We want to avoid pain, but never find out why pain arises in our life. We all want freedom, but don't know what to do with it when we get it. Or we abuse it when we have it. We all want the light, but we're afraid of facing the dirt that the light might reveal. There's a couple of different actions that light has, don't forget. We want others to fill us, but we can't fill ourselves or another. We want to see reality as it really is, but don't want to see ourselves as we really are. As Vernon Howard, the great American philosopher, said, human sickness is so severe that few can bear to look at it, but those who do will become well. That requires a certain kind of courage, the courage you're all going to need in the next lot of years. Not to look out and worry about tyrants on Capitol Hill, but the tyrant within, the syzygy, the schizoid nature of your inner republic. Or all the knights sitting at your round table within? If they're not, then don't tell me about politics. Deliberately create the problems and then offer only those solutions which result in the expansion of government. You create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that the abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price to pay in return for domestic tranquility and world peace. So, we don't have the order within, and we are looking to Big Daddy to bring it in. But Big Daddy's only too happy to do it, to create false nemesis and false heroes and create a whole culture of fear and paranoia, this way to the paranoid society. Because they will bring you, as the imagery shows you, they will bring you an order. They will bring you the New World Order. But it will be a certain kind of order. It will be the draconian or Orwellian order. As Orwell describes it, it's the boot stamping in the face of humanity forever. That will be your order.
In the early stages, you don't know that. It's intriguing. It's read this, read that, and pick up the sound bites and go from there. In the early stages, of course, one will not understand that. But the more mature person as they develop and they start asking these questions, and as they also start realizing how much they have to sacrifice in daily life to permit themselves to study this because of all of the backlashing and all of the resistance from family members and society. As you start to mature in the subject, you'll suddenly start to question, why do I even bothering with this? And it's at that point that maybe that voice will speak to you and say, but this is about your self-discovery. It's not just food for the mind, food for the brain. This is of paramount importance. Because in my work specifically, everything, the prime datum is consciousness. And if that doesn't change, then you may run around, forever like the Keystone Cops trying to make political and social change, and it will never happen. You want to ask, wouldn't you, why is it that people remain the way they are, in a pretty much unconscious state? Why are the warnings and predictions of shows like that, and the insights that they offer, people just reduce it to fiction, as they've done with the works of Professor Tolkien and Professor Lewis and so many other works? One has to ask a question about that. Why remain indifferent? Why not, fundamentally change? Is it because people really want freedom from freedom? Is it because they're scared to death of what it means to walk the Siddhartha road? Is it because they don't really want truth, justice, and freedom? Well, that's a very hard question and controversial one to ask, but everyone here should be asking it, because what happens if the answer happens to be yes? What happens if that is in fact true?
Larger study into symbolism in general, but we don't want to be doing some big heavy academic analyses here. We just want to keep it very topical and give you an overview of what I consider to be a psychic dictatorship in our midst. I'm concerned about what it's doing to us all, but I'm specifically concerned with what it's doing to the young. And we'll address that as time goes by today. We're going to be talking about advertising and the hidden messages, the aesthetically conditioning motifs and politically conditioning motifs that come across in this very ubiquitous genre, this media. But many writers in the past have dealt with this, albeit they've left out the occult tradition. What you're going to be hearing today is a combination of two particular pieces of information, two studies, which have long been disconnected. And I started doing this work when I was 13 in Ireland. Long time interest in the occult, coming from many generations back, but also an interest in art, an interest in symbolism. And I didn't know that in my life there was going to be a convergence of these two realities. It took time. It didn't happen right away. It was only actually when I came across the work of Jordan Maxwell that suddenly I understood what I'd been seeing all the time, that this was more than just skulls and ice cubes. Because why would they be there? We have a connection between aesthetics, the portrayal in art, the portrayal in advertising, and an occult agenda. Very hard to accept for some, but we hope to prove the point tonight. The Western world in general, and America, is what I call symbol illiterate. What you're going to see tonight is a small window into a concept that I've taught for years, taught children especially, and it's just symbol literacy. And science, which has always been doing catch-up anyway to what the mystics have been saying for aeons, but finally they're doing catch-up, and that's wonderful. They've just found that, in fact, symbols are important because, as you see here, it says that there are 240,000 miles of neural threads in the human brain, enough to stretch from Earth to the Moon. On every micrometer of these threads, there exists 250,000 units of information. But this data is recorded only as pictograms, only as composite images, and not as words. That's right. The universal intelligence, our phylogenetic race memory of every experience that our forefathers have had, is encoded in the brain, encoded in our DNA, in symbolism, in symbols, composite images. And today we find ourselves in a world replete with symbolism, images. We become deadened to it because it's so pervasive, in fact. Powerful ancient symbols that we've associated with spiritual uplift are now being used for a different agenda. Jeremy Campbell, in his fine book, says, one important property of language is that while its symbols may be used to bring about physical results in the real world of substance, they need not be used for that purpose. Symbols can be decoupled from physical reality to a greater or lesser extent. Words are not deeds, though they often lead to deeds. Symbols can be manipulated to form new statements and expressions which are only tentative, playful, figurative. Symbols are at liberty to be a little irresponsible and experimental. Now that's a very loaded comment there. The ancient world covered in, what is Egypt covered in, is graven images of God, graven images of divinity. It was absolutely natural to our forefathers to do so, to portray divinity, to portray the mysteries of being in symbolism. It became a very different edict in the Bible where it says, first came the Word. In the beginning was the Word. Well, I take exemption to that. I'm sorry. No, in the beginning does not come the Word of God. In the beginning comes the image of God. Or Goddess, if you want to be actually pedantic about it. But let's leave that aside for now. I work with the tarot and the divination, which is the archive of knowledge, the Gnostic core of the great book of symbolism. The greater book of symbolism, the tarot, these are the main chapters. Anyone who wants to get symbol literate, because Mircea Eliade, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung have gone blue in the face asking us to get symbol literate. I fear that the productions of the democratic poets may often be surcharged with immense and incoherent imagery, with exaggerated descriptions and strange creations, and that the fantastic beings of their brain may sometimes make us regret the world of reality. In 1835. You think that's old? Plato was doing the same thing in 300 BC when he warned about the artists, quote-unquote, this has been misinterpreted by many scholars, but he just said that the artists, quote-unquote, if they're given too much dominion over the mind, there will be a decline of civilization. I believe that he was aware even then of people who are still with us, still operating in our society today. Don't believe it? This is a quote. It says, I think we are destroying the minds of America, and that has been one of my lifelong ambitions. You can read for yourself who wrote that. They're happy to tell you what they're doing. In 1990, compared to the previous 2 decades, the United States saw the highest juvenile arrest rate for violent crimes ever. Teen arrests for forcible rape had doubled, teen murder rates quadrupled, mostly due to an increase in shootings. During the same 2 decades, suicide rate for teenagers tripled, as did the number of children under 14 who are murder victims. Douglas Rushkoff, in his book Media Virus, says children's television and MTV are the easiest places to launch countercultural missiles. The more harmless or inane the forum, the more unsuspecting the audience. I highlighted MTV there for an interesting point. One of the methodologies that these individuals use in their corporate logos is based on the phoneme system. If you say the word as a mantra to yourself, MTV, and say it quickly, MTV, MTV, empty TV, empty TV, empty TV. Ever seen any kids that watch MTV? They look pretty empty to me, wouldn't you say? Well, that's what they were being told. The great philosopher and theologian Erasmus said, "The main hope of a nation lies in the proper education of its youth." The others are saying to the children, forget it. Questions are a burden, and answers a prison for oneself. Let us take control. Stop thinking. It's too much of a bother. We'll take care of you. So the experts are saying what is at stake is nothing less than the next generation, particularly males who in growing up are especially vulnerable to such disruptive forces as the devastating effects of divorce, poverty and unemployment. The status of American children and families is as desperate as ever. We are depriving millions of children of their competence and moral character. Esquire magazine said kids won't even find out how much their values have been perverted until they hit the high school. And Douglas Rushkoff says we have come to expect hidden messages in our kids' television. But this story of manipulation goes way back and has occult roots. Anyone who's done their homework knows that one of the groups that operate behind secret societies, it was the Fabian Society from Oxford University. It was founded by Sidney West, who again is very happy to tell you what they're doing. He says to play on those millions of minds, to watch them slowly respond to an unseen stimulus, to guide their aspirations without their knowledge. All this, whether in high capacities or in humble, is a big and endless game of chess, with ever extraordinary excitement. Well, we got them. They're called the media, but they've been around longer than television, because the word, in fact, if you study it, goes back to Medes, and to a place in the Middle East, not far from where Libya is now, called Media.
That's what every guru, every priest, every politician is telling you. It's all tomorrow. Every scientist, you're going to have it tomorrow. You're going to have it tomorrow. You can't have it today, because we don't live in the now. We live in tomorrow's world. Tomorrow doesn't even their own science proves tomorrow doesn't exist, but they're going to tell you it all exists in tomorrow. So the fundamental line is discover that there's a hidden hand, mind controlling the world, operating to keep you down. Understand that you are a participant in that because you are allowing those hooks into your flesh. I've said it many times, and I said it recently, said it last year, you must distinguish the difference between saying, have I been sold a lie? And the difference between, yeah, but have I bought a lie? Because there's all the difference in the world attitudinally between those two statements. You are being sold a lie. But that's the perfect right of that salesman to sell you a lie. The universal force doesn't care about that.